A German shepherd was trapped, struggling to breathe, when a baby heard the sounds and took action that even surprised firefighters. Subscribe now and see how that simple act saved a life. It was one of those oppressive August mornings in Pinewood Springs, a forgotten suburb on the outskirts of Cleveland, Ohio, where the air hung heavy between the leaves and even the tree branches seemed to droop with fatigue. The neighborhood was a patchwork of aging homes, their yards gradually blending into vacant lots where nature reclaimed forgotten spaces. Sarah Mitchell, a speech therapist on maternity leave, sat cross-legged on a faded quilt spread across her backyard, watching her 15-month-old son, Ethan, play with wooden blocks. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy bun and dark circles underlined her green eyes, evidence of another night with minimal sleep. Being a single mother wasn't what she had planned, not after Jason had promised they would face parenthood together. But his pharmaceutical sales job had taken him to Seattle 8 months ago, and his visits had become increasingly rare, his phone calls shorter. "Look at the clouds, sweetie," Sarah pointed upward, grateful for the moment of peace as Ethan clapped his hands with delight. His blue eyes, just like his father's, following the shapes drifting above them. The sounds of the neighborhood provided a familiar soundtrack. Mrs. Hawkins frying bacon 2 doors down, the rhythmic chime of Frank's bakery truck making its rounds, and the distant drone of lawnmowers battling summer growth. Pinewood Springs wasn't glamorous, but it was home, and the neighbors looked out for each other in their own reserved Midwestern way. Ethan suddenly froze, his small body becoming unnaturally still, his head tilted slightly, like a bird listening for danger. "Ethan, what is it, buddy?" Sarah asked, reaching for him, but the baby wasn't responding to her voice. His attention had shifted entirely, fixed on something beyond their wooden fence, where an abandoned lot stretched, filled with the skeletons of discarded furniture and building materials. Then he began to cry. Not his usual hungry cry or his tired whimpers, but something Sarah had never heard before. It was urgent, insistent, almost purposeful. "Shh, it's okay," she soothed, pulling him close, but Ethan twisted in her arms, stretching toward the vacant lot, his chubby finger pointing with unmistakable intention. Sarah stood up, bouncing him gently. "What's over there that's got you so worked up?" Ethan's cries intensified, and something in his desperation triggered a maternal instinct Sarah couldn't ignore. She glanced at the rusty gate separating their yard from the lot. In 3 years of living here, she'd never ventured into that tangle of weeds and trash. The property belonged to old man Gunderson, who'd moved to Florida years ago, and seemingly forgotten his investment. Okay, we'll check it out," she whispered, grabbing her phone from her pocket. She unlatched the gate, its hinges groaning in protest. The vacant lot was worse up close. Broken glass glittered dangerously in the sunlight, and plastic bags clung to overgrown bushes like strange fruit. Sarah carefully navigated around a pile of broken cinder blocks, mentally cataloging potential hazards as she went. Ethan had quieted slightly, but remained fixated, leaning forward in her arms as if pulling her towards something. "This isn't safe, baby," she murmured, but continued forward, past a stack of rotting wooden pallets and the shell of what appeared to be an ancient washing machine. Near the back of the lot, partially hidden by tall weeds, stood an old refrigerator, its once white surface now yellowed and rusted, lying on its side like a fallen monument to domestic life. As they approached, Ethan became increasingly agitated, his little body practically vibrating with urgency. Sarah stopped several feet away, suddenly afraid. Why had she followed her baby's inexplicable impulse into this hazardous space? What was she expecting to find? But then she heard it, so faint she might have imagined it, a scratching sound coming from inside the refrigerator, followed by something else, a weak, muffled whimper. "Oh my God," she whispered, her heart rate accelerating as she stepped closer. She pressed her ear against the refrigerator's surface, the metal hot from baking in the sun. There it was again, the unmistakable sound of an animal in distress. Something was trapped inside, something alive. Sarah set Ethan down on a clear patch of dirt and tried the handle, but years of exposure had sealed it shut with rust. She pulled harder, her muscles straining, fingernails breaking against the unyielding metal. "Help!" she shouted, turning toward the nearby homes. "Somebody help us!" 2 houses down, Roy Thompson was watering his prized roses when he heard the cries. At 68, the retired firefighter still possessed the instincts of his former profession. He dropped the hose and moved with surprising speed toward the sound. "Sarah, that you?" he called as he approached the fence. "Roy, there's something alive trapped in this refrigerator. I can't get it open!" Within minutes, Roy had hopped the fence with agility that belied his age, bringing a crowbar from his garage. The commotion drew other neighbors. Diane Lopez from across the street, the Patel family from the blue house on the corner, and Marcus Williams, the high school football coach who lived next door to Sarah. "Stand back," Roy instructed, wedging the crowbar into the seal of the refrigerator. "Marcus, give me a hand." The 2 men strained against the rusted metal, and with a sudden pop, the seal broke. A blast of hot, fetid air escaped as the door swung open. Inside, lying on its side and barely moving, was a large German shepherd. Its tongue hung limply from its mouth, eyes glassy and unfocused. The dog's ribcage rose and fell in shallow, rapid breaths. "Jesus," Marcus whispered, taking off his t-shirt and soaking it with water from the bottle he'd been carrying. "How long has it been in there?" Roy knelt beside the animal, gently applying the wet cloth to its neck. "Hard to say. Hours at least, in this heat." He didn't finish the sentence. Diane Lopez, who volunteered at the county animal shelter, was already on her phone. "I'm calling Dr. Reeves. His clinic is 10 minutes away." Sarah stood transfixed, Ethan clutched protectively in her arms. The baby had stopped crying completely and was now strangely calm, his eyes fixed on the suffering animal with an intensity that seemed impossible for a child so young. "It's going to be okay," Sarah whispered, unsure if she was reassuring her son or the dying dog. What happened next would later be described differently by everyone present. Sarah would insist that Ethan had squirmed with such determination that she momentarily lost her grip. Marcus would claim the baby had moved with surprising coordination. Roy would simply shake his head and mutter about things beyond explanation. Somehow, Ethan broke free from his mother's arms, toddled forward with unexpected steadiness, and, before anyone could stop him, placed his tiny hand on the dog's muzzle. The touch was gentle, deliberate, and accompanied by a sound, not quite words, but something more than baby babble, that seemed to pass between child and animal like a current. The German shepherd's eyes, which had been dull and unseeing, suddenly focused. It blinked once, slowly, and its breathing, while still labored, deepened slightly. "Ethan!" Sarah gasped, rushing forward to retrieve him, afraid the distressed animal might snap. But the dog didn't move aggressively. Instead, it seemed to relax under the baby's touch, as if recognizing something in the child that no one else could see. Roy, who had witnessed countless emergencies during his career, stood speechless. "I've never seen anything like that," he finally said, his voice barely audible. In the distance, sirens wailed as Dr. Reeves's animal ambulance approached. The neighborhood had gathered now, a circle of concerned faces surrounding the scene. Someone had brought water bowls. Another neighbor arrived with towels. Sarah lifted Ethan back into her arms, but his eyes never left the dog. There was something in her son's expression, a knowing, an awareness that sent a shiver through her despite the summer heat. As the veterinarian's van pulled up to the curb, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this strange encounter was not random coincidence, but the beginning of something she couldn't yet understand, something important, Something that would change not just her life and Ethan's, but perhaps the lives of everyone in Pinewood Springs. Dr. Michael Reeves had been a veterinarian for nearly 30 years, but the emergency call from Pinewood Springs left him puzzled. His assistant Jenny monitored the German Shepherd's vitals as they sped back to the clinic, oxygen mask secured over the dog's muzzle. "Trapped in an abandoned refrigerator," Michael muttered, shaking his head. "Who would do such a thing?" "The woman who called said a baby found him," Jenny replied, adjusting the IV drip. "Said it was the strangest thing she'd ever seen." Michael glanced in the rearview mirror at Sarah Mitchell's sedan following closely behind. Through her windshield, he could see the baby strapped in his car seat, unusually alert for a child his age. The Woodland Animal Clinic was a converted Victorian house on the edge of town, surrounded by maple trees and equipped with state-of-the-art veterinary technology. Michael's pride and joy after decades of saving every penny. As they pulled into the parking lot, his team was already waiting at the rear entrance with a stretcher. Severe dehydration, hypothermia, possible organ damage, Michael called out as they transferred the dog. "Let's get him into cooling immediately." Sarah parked haphazardly, rushing toward the entrance with Ethan in her arms. A receptionist tried to direct her to the waiting area, but the baby began that strange, insistent crying again, his body rigid with distress. "Please," Sarah begged, "he won't settle. He's been like this since we found the dog. Could we just see him? Just for a moment?" The receptionist looked uncertain, but Dr. Reeves, hearing the commotion, stepped into the hallway. He observed the child's behavior with professional curiosity. "It's highly unusual," he began, then paused as Ethan's cries intensified. "But I've learned to trust these instincts. Come back briefly. Your son will need to stay in your arms at all times." In the treatment room, the German Shepherd lay on an examination table, surrounded by equipment monitoring his temperature and heart rate. Despite his weakened state, the dog's eyes opened when Ethan entered, and his tail thumped weakly against the metal surface. "That's remarkable," Dr. Reeves whispered, watching as the dog's heart rate stabilized on the monitor. "He seems to recognize your son." Sarah approached cautiously, keeping a safe distance. "Is he going to be all right?" Michael's expression was guarded. "The next 24 hours will be critical. He's suffering from extreme heat exposure and dehydration. There may be neurological damage we haven't detected yet." He studied the dog more closely. "He's not microchipped, but this is a purebred animal, well-muscled despite his current condition. Someone owned him, cared for him, until recently." Ethan squirmed in Sarah's arms, reaching toward the dog with determined little hands. "What's your son's name?" Michael asked softly. "Ethan, he's 15 months. And has he always had this connection with animals?" Sarah shook her head. "We don't have pets. Jason, my ex, was allergic." She hesitated. "But there's something about this dog. Ethan heard him when no one else did. It's like they understand each other somehow." Michael nodded thoughtfully. In 3 decades of veterinary practice, he'd witnessed countless examples of the mysterious bonds between humans and animals, things science couldn't fully explain. "Some connections transcend our understanding," he said simply. As they spoke, a commotion erupted in the waiting room. A man's voice, loud and agitated, carried through the doors. "I'm telling you, that's my dog. German Shepherd. 3 years. Old disappeared 2 weeks ago." Dr. Reeves excused himself, motioning for Sarah to stay put. Through the partially open door, she could see a tall man in an expensive suit arguing with the receptionist. His polished appearance seemed at odds with his emotional state. Face flushed, tie askew, designer watch glinting as he gestured emphatically. "Sir, please lower your voice," Michael said calmly as he approached. "I understand you believe we have your dog, but we've just admitted a critically ill German Shepherd found in extremely disturbing circumstances." "That's him!" "That's Max," the man insisted. "I've been searching everywhere. Put up posters all over the county. There was a reward and everything." Something about the man's demeanor made Sarah uneasy. She instinctively stepped back from the door, holding Ethan closer. "I'm Bradley Winters," the man continued, dropping a business card on the counter. "I'm the executive director of Westfield Development. My company is responsible for the Lakeside Heights project. Perhaps you've heard of it?" The receptionist and Dr. Reeves exchanged glances. Everyone in the area knew about Lakeside Heights, a controversial luxury housing development that had been battling environmental groups for permits to build on protected wetlands. "Mr. Winters, your dog is in serious condition," Michael explained. "If you can provide proof of ownership, vaccination records, photos, we can discuss this further. But right now, my priority is saving his life." Winters straightened his jacket, composing himself. "Of course, Doctor. I apologize for my outburst. I've been distraught since Max disappeared. He's a trained protection dog, cost me nearly $15,000. I have all his documentation at home. I'll return with it immediately." As Winters left, Michael returned to the treatment room, his expression troubled. "The dog may have an owner," he told Sarah gently. "A Bradley Winters." Sarah's stomach tightened. "The Westfield Development guy? The one always in the news?" Michael nodded. "He's coming back with documentation." Sarah looked down at Ethan, who had finally fallen asleep in her arms, one hand still reaching toward the German Shepherd. Something felt wrong. If this was Winter's beloved pet, how had he ended up locked in an abandoned refrigerator miles from the upscale neighborhood where Winters presumably lived? "Dr. Reeves, I know this sounds strange, but I don't think that man should get this dog back. Not yet, anyway. Something doesn't add up." Michael sighed. "I understand your concern, but legally, if he can prove ownership—" "What if someone did this to the dog deliberately?" Sarah pressed. "What if it wasn't an accident?" The veterinarian's expression darkened. "That's a serious accusation, Ms. Mitchell." "I know, but Ethan led me to him for a reason. I can't explain it, but I feel responsible now." Before Michael could respond, Jenny rushed in. "His temperature's dropping too quickly. We need to stabilize him." Sarah was ushered back to the waiting room, where she settled into an uncomfortable chair with Ethan sleeping against her shoulder. Hours passed. Other pet owners came and went. The sky outside darkened to dusk, then night. Sarah called her neighbor Diane to explain the situation, asking if she could check on the house. Near midnight, Bradley Winters returned, carrying a leather portfolio. He stopped short when he saw Sarah and Ethan. "You're still here," he observed, his tone unreadable. Sarah nodded, suddenly conscious of her rumpled appearance and the baby drool on her shirt. "We found him. My son heard him somehow." Winter's expression softened slightly. "Well, I'm grateful, truly. Max means the world to me." He held up the portfolio. "I've brought everything. Purchase records, medical history, photos. Once, Dr. Reeves verifies, I'd like to transfer Max to my private veterinarian in Shaker Heights." Something in his words, their rehearsed precision perhaps, heightened Sarah's unease. Dr. Reeves emerged from the treatment area, looking exhausted. "Mr. Winters, Ms. Mitchell, the dog is stabilized for now, but still critical. I'd prefer not to move him for at least 48 hours. "I understand, Doctor, but I have facilities at my estate that would—" "With all due respect," Michael interrupted firmly, "I'm not releasing this animal tonight. He needs constant monitoring, and any transport could jeopardize his recovery." Winter's jaw tightened momentarily before he forced a smile. "Of course. You're the expert. I'll review these documents with you now, then." As the men moved to the reception desk, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "You need to get home now. Someone broke into your house. Police are here. Nothing taken, but they went through all your papers. Stay safe." Sarah stared at the message, then at Bradley Winter's back as he leaned over the counter, pointing at something in his documents. A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with the clinic's aggressive air conditioning. Ethan stirred in her arms, his eyes fluttering open. He looked directly at the treatment room door, then up at his mother's face, and made a small whimpering sound that seemed to carry a warning. Whatever connection had formed between her son and the rescued dog, Sarah was beginning to believe it might be mutual, and possibly their only protection against something neither of them yet understood. The police cruiser was still parked outside Sarah's house when she pulled into the driveway at nearly 1 in the morning. Officer Pete Rodriguez, a former high school classmate, stood talking with Diane on the front porch. His face registered surprise when he saw her emerge from the car with a sleeping Ethan. "Sarah, thank God," Diane hurried down the steps. "I've been so worried." "What happened?" Sarah whispered, careful not to wake Ethan. Officer Rodriguez gestured towards the house. "Neighbor heard noises around 9 p.m., saw a flashlight moving through your house, called it in. Whoever it was, they were gone by the time I arrived." Inside, Sarah surveyed the damage with growing apprehension. Drawers stood open, contents spilled across countertops and floors. Her desk in the corner of the living room had been thoroughly ransacked. Folders emptied, papers scattered. "The weird thing is," Pete continued, "nothing valuable seems to be missing. TV's still here, laptop untouched. They went through your personal papers, though, thoroughly." Sarah sank onto the couch, cradling Ethan against her chest. "This doesn't make sense." "Any idea what they might have been looking for?" Pete asked, flipping open his notepad. Sarah shook her head, then hesitated. "There was an incident today. We found a dog, a German Shepherd, locked in an abandoned refrigerator in the vacant lot next door." She described the rescue. Ethan's strange behavior and Bradley Winter's appearance at the vet clinic. "It seems like too much of a coincidence." Pete's eyebrows rose. "Bradley Winters? Of Westfield Development." He whistled softly. "That man's connected to half the city council. You sure you want to imply he might be involved in something shady?" "I'm not implying anything," Sarah backpedaled. "It just feels off." After Pete left, promising increased patrols in the area, Diane helped Sarah straighten up the worst of the mess. "You're welcome to stay with me tonight," she offered. But Sarah declined. Whatever was happening, running away felt wrong. "We'll be fine. The doors are locked, and I've got Pete's direct number." Once alone, Sarah placed Ethan in his crib and collapsed onto her bed, mind racing despite her exhaustion. She had spent years helping children communicate, teaching them to form words and express needs. But Ethan's behavior today went beyond normal development. It was as if he had perceived something beyond human senses, something primal and urgent. The next morning, Sarah called in a favor from her colleague Lisa to watch Ethan while she returned to the veterinary clinic. She needed answers about the dog, and her instincts told her time was running out. Dr. Reeves looked surprised to see her. "Ms. Mitchell, I was about to call you. Is the dog okay?" "Remarkably, yes. He's showing signs of recovery that frankly astonish me." He led her to a recovery kennel where the German Shepherd lay on a thick blanket, IV still attached, but eyes alert. When he saw Sarah, his tail thumped against the blanket. "His name is apparently Ranger, not Max as Mr. Winters claimed," Michael said, his tone carefully neutral. "That's according to his microchip." Sarah's breath caught. "I thought you said he wasn't chipped." "We scan every animal twice. Standard procedure. Nothing registered yesterday. But this morning my technician tried a universal scanner we rarely need to use. The chip is an unusual European brand." He handed her a printout. "The registration traces back to a K9 training center in Pennsylvania. I've left messages, but haven't heard back." Sarah studied the document, her speech therapist's eye catching an odd detail. "These dates are inconsistent. The microchip was registered 3 years ago, but Winter's documentation showed he purchased the dog only 18 months ago. Michael nodded grimly. I noticed that too. Mr. Winters was quite insistent about taking possession immediately when I called him this morning. I explained that I'm required to resolve the microchip discrepancy first. How did he take that? Let's just say I've scheduled extra staff today. Michael hesitated. Ms. Mitchell, I don't normally involve clients in these matters, but there's something else. Ranger's blood work showed traces of an unusual sedative, one typically used in research facilities, not veterinary practices. Sarah knelt beside the kennel, reaching through the bars to let Ranger sniff her hand. The dog recognized her scent, edging closer until her fingers brushed his fur. What exactly are you saying, Dr. Reeves? I'm saying that Ranger may have been deliberately drugged before being placed in that refrigerator. His voice lowered. And given the substance involved, I'm concerned about who might have access to such medications. A technician appeared at the doorway. Dr. Reeves, there's a call for you. The Canine Training Center. Michael excused himself, leaving Sarah alone with Ranger. The dog watched her with an intelligence that seemed almost human. On impulse, Sarah pulled out her phone and showed him a picture of Ethan. Ranger's reaction was immediate. Ears forward, tail wagging with newfound energy. You remember him, don't you? She whispered. What is it about you two? When Michael returned, his expression had darkened further. The training center confirms Ranger was one of their dogs, an exceptional animal with unique capabilities. He was sold 3 years ago to a private security contractor working with environmental research facilities. Not to Bradley Winters. No, to a company called Northern Edge Security. They reported him stolen 6 months ago during an operation. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Sarah, I think we may be dealing with something beyond a lost pet. The center asked some very specific questions about where Ranger was found and who has shown interest in him. Winters, Sarah said quietly. You think he's involved somehow? I don't know, but I've contacted Animal Control and the police. Until we sort this out, Ranger stays here under observation. Back at home that afternoon, Sarah couldn't focus. She paced the living room while Lisa played with Ethan on the floor, building towers for him to knock down. Her mind kept circling back to the sequence of events. Ethan hearing Ranger, the rescue, Winters appearing, her house being searched. None of it made sense unless... Lisa, she said suddenly, remember that project I was consulting on last year? The one with the university research team studying nonverbal communication patterns in children. Lisa looked up. The one where they were recording environmental sounds to see if babies could distinguish meaningful noises. Sure, you were excited about it. Did I ever bring those materials home? Files, recordings, anything? You had a flash drive, I think, said it contained some proprietary algorithms they were developing. Sarah's pulse quickened. She hurried to her desk, searching through the remaining folders. The small blue flash drive was gone, something she hadn't noticed in the chaos after the break-in. Her phone rang, displaying the veterinary clinic's number. Sarah, it's Michael. Ranger's been taken. Her blood ran cold. What? How? 2 men claiming to be from Animal Control. They had badges, paperwork. All of it looked legitimate. It wasn't until after they left that we realized the documentation was forged. Sarah sank into a chair. Have you called the police? Yes, but... He lowered his voice. One of my technicians managed to slip a GPS tracker into Ranger's collar. It was meant for lost pets, but it's transmitting his location. He's currently moving north on the highway. Sarah grabbed a notepad. Give me the tracking information. After ending the call, Sarah stared at the coordinates she'd written down. What was she thinking? She couldn't chase after dognappers, especially not with Ethan, but something told her that Ranger was key to understanding what was happening, and possibly to her and Ethan's safety. A text message arrived from an unknown number. Ranger is part of something bigger. Not safe to discuss openly. Meet me at Carson Nature Preserve, East Entrance, 4 p.m. Come alone. MJ. MJ, Sarah murmured, bewildered. She knew no one with those initials. Lisa, noticing her distress, moved closer. Sarah, what's going on? After a moment's hesitation, Sarah explained everything. The rescue, the break-in, Ranger's mysterious background, and now his disappearance. You can't get involved in this, Lisa warned. If there's something illegal happening, let the police handle it. But what if it's connected to Ethan somehow? You didn't see how he reacted to Ranger, Lisa. It was extraordinary. They were interrupted by a knock at the door. Sarah approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. Her shoulders sagged with relief when she recognized Roy Thompson, their neighbor who had helped with the rescue. Roy, thank God it's you, she said, opening the door. The retired firefighter stepped inside, his weathered face etched with concern. Sarah, something's not right in the neighborhood. There's a black SUV that's driven past your house 3 times in the last hour. Same vehicle was parked outside the vet clinic earlier. Sarah showed him the text message. Someone wants to meet about Ranger. Roy's expression grew grave. This is getting dangerous, Sarah. These aren't people to mess with. I know, she admitted, but Ranger saved Ethan's life. I can't just abandon him. Ethan, who had been contentedly playing, suddenly crawled rapidly to the window, pulling himself up by the sill. Outside, a black SUV drove slowly past the house. The baby made an urgent sound, the same noise he'd made when he'd first heard Ranger trapped. Sarah and Roy exchanged alarmed glances. I think, Roy said quietly, that you and Ethan should come stay at my place tonight. My storm cellar's been converted to a proper shelter, leftover paranoia from my firefighting days. No one would think to look for you there. As they hurriedly packed essentials for an overnight stay, Sarah's mind raced with questions. What was Ranger's connection to Westfield Development? Why was her son able to sense things others couldn't? And most importantly, who could she trust with their safety now that unknown forces seemed determined to find them? Whatever answers awaited, at the Carson Nature Preserve, Sarah knew one thing with certainty. The bond between Ethan and Ranger was no ordinary connection. It was something that powerful people wanted to understand, or perhaps silence at any cost. Roy's converted storm cellar was surprisingly comfortable. A small but efficient space with reinforced walls, emergency supplies, a fold-out sofa, and even a tiny bathroom tucked behind a partition. Most importantly, it was secure and completely hidden from street view, accessible only through a trapdoor in Roy's pantry floor. Vietnam left me with a healthy respect for preparedness, Roy explained, as he set up a portable crib for Ethan. Never thought I'd be using this place to hide a speech therapist and her baby, though. Sarah managed a weak smile as she unpacked Ethan's favorite stuffed elephant. I still can't believe this is happening. Yesterday morning, my biggest concern was whether Ethan would ever say his first word. Now we're hiding from mysterious SUVs and corporate executives. Roy's weathered face turned serious as he settled into an armchair. Tell me about this text message again. Sarah showed him her phone. I have no idea who MJ could be, and obviously I can't go to Carson Nature Preserve. Alone. You can't go at all, Roy corrected firmly, but someone should. Whoever this is might have answers. Sarah looked up sharply. Roy, no, it could be dangerous. I spent 30 years running into burning buildings, Sarah. I think I can handle a mysterious meeting in a public park. He checked his watch. It's nearly 3. I could be there by 4, easily. After some debate, they agreed Roy would go, while Sarah and Ethan remained hidden. Lisa, who had accompanied them to Roy's house, volunteered to park near the preserves. Entrance as backup, ready to call police if Roy didn't check in by text every 15 minutes. As they finalized their makeshift plan, Ethan played contentedly on the floor, babbling to his stuffed elephant as if nothing were amiss. Sarah watched him with amazement. Despite everything, he seemed completely at ease in the underground shelter. "He's a special kid," Roy observed, following her gaze. "The way he found that dog. I've never seen anything like it. Almost like he could hear something the rest of us couldn't." Sarah nodded slowly. "It's not just that. There's something about his connection with Ranger. It's like they recognize each other somehow." At 3:30, Roy and Lisa departed, leaving Sarah and Ethan alone in the shelter. Sarah activated an old baby monitor Roy had found, placing the receiver near the trap door so she could hear if anyone entered the house above. To distract herself from worry, Sarah opened her laptop and began researching. First, she looked up Northern Edge Security, the company that had supposedly owned Ranger originally. Their website was sparse, just a landing page describing specialized security solutions for sensitive research environments with a contact form. No staff listings, no specific services detailed. Next, she searched for Westfield Development. Bradley Winter's company had a much more substantial online presence. Glossy project portfolios, press releases about luxury housing developments, and environmental impact statements that had been contested by local conservation groups. One article particularly caught her attention: a recent dispute over Westfield's plans to develop land adjacent to Carson Nature Preserve, the very location where MJ had arranged to meet. Sarah was so absorbed in her reading that she almost missed the soft crackle from the baby monitor. She froze, straining to hear. There it was again, the unmistakable sound of footsteps moving across Roy's kitchen floor above them. Sarah quickly shut her laptop, plunging the shelter into semi-darkness. She scooped up Ethan and retreated to the furthest corner, where Roy had shown her an emergency exit that led to a drainage pipe behind the house. Her heart hammered in her chest as the footsteps paused directly over the trap door. Then came a sound that made her breath catch, a familiar whine followed by the scratch of claws against wood. "Ranger?" she whispered incredulously. The scratching intensified. Struggling to control her trembling hands, Sarah reached for her phone to text Roy, but before she could type a message, the trap door lifted slightly. "Sarah? It's Michael Reeves. I've got Ranger with me. Are you down there?" Relief flooded through her as she recognized the veterinarian's voice. "Yes. How did you find us?" The trap door opened fully, revealing Dr. Reeves's concerned face. Ranger pushed past him, bounding down the stairs with renewed energy. The German Shepherd went straight to Ethan, who squealed with delight and buried his tiny hands in the dog's fur. "Ranger led me here," Michael explained, descending the stairs. "After he was taken, the tracker showed him being transported to a facility outside town. Then suddenly, the signal started moving again, heading directly to your house. When no one answered, Ranger became agitated, pulling me toward Roy's place. He shook his head in amazement. "He tracked you here. I've never seen anything like it." "How did you get him back?" Sarah asked, noticing a fresh cut above Michael's eyebrow. The veterinarian's expression hardened. "Let's just say the security at North Lake Research Station isn't as good as they think. I realized where they were taking him and intercepted the transport." He touched his injury gingerly. "There was a disagreement." "You stole him back?" "Michael, that's the right thing to do," he finished firmly. "Once I saw what they were planning for him, I couldn't let it happen." Sarah watched as Ranger checked every corner of the shelter before settling protectively beside Ethan. "What exactly is going on, Michael? Why is everyone so interested in one German Shepherd?" Michael sat heavily on the sofa, suddenly looking exhausted. "Ranger isn't just any dog, Sarah. He's part of an experimental program developing advanced capabilities in service animals. The abilities they've cultivated go beyond typical training. They're about enhanced sensory perception, especially relating to human distress. Like hearing someone trapped where humans couldn't detect them, Sarah whispered. Exactly. But Ranger developed abilities beyond what his trainers anticipated. He began detecting threats before they happened, sensing chemical changes, structural weaknesses, even human intentions that presented danger. Michael leaned forward. 6 months ago, he disappeared during a facility inspection at North Lake. His handlers claimed he'd been stolen, but there were rumors. What kind of rumors? That he'd escaped on his own, that he'd somehow understood they were going to escalate the testing, make it more invasive. Michael's voice dropped. And now, I think I know why Bradley Winters is involved. Westfield Development has been trying to build on protected wetlands that contain rare plant species with potential pharmaceutical applications. North Lake is their research partner, developing new compounds from these plants. Sarah's mind raced to connect the pieces, but what does this have to do with Ethan? Why did Ranger respond to him? Before Michael could answer, his phone chimed with a text. It's from someone called MJ, says, "Tell Sarah I know about her son's ability. Winters knows too. Carson Preserve parking lot. Now." Sarah stared at him. "That's the same person who texted me earlier. How did they get your number?" "I don't know, but Roy and your friend Lisa are there right now. We need to go." It could be a trap. It could also be our only chance for answers. Michael's expression softened as he looked at Ethan and Ranger, the child now sleeping peacefully against the dog's side. "Sarah, I think your son has a gift, similar to Ranger's, something that allows him to perceive things beyond normal human capability. And I think that's why your house was searched. They're looking for any documentation about Ethan's abilities." Sarah remembered the missing flash drive from her consulting work on nonverbal communication in children. "My research. They think I knew about this." "Did you?" "No, I mean, Ethan has always been perceptive, but nothing like this." She stroked her son's hair gently. "Until he found Ranger." Michael checked his watch. "We need to decide. Roy and Lisa are expecting to meet someone who might have crucial information." After a moment's hesitation, Sarah nodded. "We'll go. But Ethan stays here, safely hidden." "Ranger should stay with him," Michael suggested. "They're clearly bonded, and he's the best protection Ethan could have." Sarah prepared the shelter for Ethan's comfort, ensuring the emergency exits were accessible and programming Roy's number into the old landline phone mounted on the wall. She kissed her sleeping son's forehead, whispering promises to return soon, and then, with a final glance at Ranger standing guard beside the crib, she followed Michael up the stairs. The drive to Carson Nature Preserve took 20 tense minutes. As they approached the parking lot, Sarah spotted Roy's pickup truck and Lisa's sedan parked side by side. Both appeared empty. "Where are they?" Sarah murmured as Michael pulled alongside. A sharp rap on the window made them both jump. Lisa stood there, her expression urgent. "Thank God you're here. Roy's with her, a woman who says she worked at North Lake. They're down by the wetlands observation deck." Sarah and Michael followed Lisa along a wooden boardwalk that extended into the protected marshlands. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the water, turning the surface into a mirror of amber light. Ahead, they could see Roy's tall figure standing beside a slender woman with short grey hair. As they approached, the woman turned. She appeared to be in her 60s, with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the confident posture of someone used to authority. "Sarah Mitchell," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent Sarah couldn't place. "I'm Dr. Marjorie Jensen. I believe we have much to discuss about your son and a very special dog." "You're MJ," Sarah realized. "You worked at North Lake?" "I was the lead researcher on Project Sentinel, a program developing enhanced sensory capabilities in service. Animals. Ranger was our most exceptional subject. Marjorie's eyes clouded, until I discovered what Bradley Winters really intended to use our research for. Which was what? Michael asked. When we began, the goal was creating service animals that could detect environmental hazards, assist in disaster response, even predict medical emergencies. But Winters saw another application, using the animals' abilities to locate rare botanical compounds on protected lands, allowing Westfield to identify valuable properties before purchasing them. Roy crossed his arms. That doesn't sound illegal, just opportunistic. The illegal part came when Ranger began exhibiting empathic abilities, forming connections with certain humans that amplified both his capabilities and theirs. Marjorie turned to Sarah. Like your son, Ms. Mitchell, children under 3 sometimes retain perceptual abilities adults have lost. The capacity to sense subtle environmental changes, energy fluctuations, even emotional states from considerable distances. You're saying Ethan has some kind of enhanced perception? Sarah asked skeptically. I'm saying Ethan and Ranger recognize something in each other immediately. A shared sensitivity that creates a powerful connection. And Winters wants to understand that connection because it could be exploited. Marjorie's expression darkened. That's why I helped Ranger escape. That's why I've been monitoring Winters' activities. And that's why I contacted you when I realized your son might be in danger. A twig snapped in the woods behind them. All 5 turned sharply as a figure emerged from the shadows. Bradley Winters, his designer suit incongruous against the natural setting, his smile cold and calculating. Dr. Jensen, he said smoothly, I've been looking everywhere for you. How inconsiderate of you to take all your research when you left us. Bradley Winters wasn't alone. 2 men in dark suits emerged from the tree line behind him. The same security personnel who had taken Ranger from the clinic, Michael realized with a jolt. Mr. Winters, Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt, I think you have some explaining to do about why your men broke into my home. Winters adjusted his tie, unruffled. A regrettable misunderstanding. We were simply retrieving company, property, research materials you had access to during your university consulting work. Materials that technically belong to Northlake Research, a subsidiary of Westfield Development. You mean the flash drive, Sarah replied. It contained nothing but anonymous voice recordings from the communication study. On the contrary, Ms. Mitchell, that study, which you believed was about non-verbal communication patterns in children, was actually gathering baseline data for Project Sentinel. Dr. Jensen here conveniently removed most of our research when she left, but your flash drive contained valuable frequency analyses showing how certain children respond to environmental stimuli beyond normal human hearing range. Marjorie stepped forward. The study wasn't authorized for human subjects, Bradley. You crossed an ethical line and several legal ones. Winters spread his hands in a gesture of innocence. We are simply exploring the frontiers of human potential, Marjorie. Imagine the applications. Children who can detect environmental toxins before instruments can measure them. Service dogs who can alert to medical emergencies before symptoms appear. Communication systems based on frequencies most humans never perceive. Dodo, what you're describing is exploitation, Michael interjected, using children and animals as biological sensors without consent. I prefer to call it evolution, Winters countered smoothly. And your son, Ms. Mitchell, appears to be quite evolved indeed. The bond he formed with Ranger after just one encounter is unprecedented in our research. Sarah felt a chill run through her. You've been watching us. Monitoring, yes, for scientific purposes. Winters stepped closer. I'm prepared to offer you a research position, Sarah. Comfortable salary, excellent benefits, a proper environment for Ethan to develop his extraordinary abilities, all perfectly ethical and above board. Roy moved protectively beside Sarah. The lady's not interested in your offer. Winter's pleasant expression hardened slightly. I don't believe I was addressing you, Mr. Thompson. This is a professional opportunity being extended to a qualified speech therapist with unique research potential. He turned back to Sarah. Consider what this could mean for Ethan. We could help him understand his gifts, provide him with the best resources to develop them. Under your control, Marjorie added bitterly, just like you tried to control Ranger when his abilities exceeded your expectations. Speaking of our exceptional canine subject, Winters said, glancing around, I notice he isn't with you. Where might you be keeping him, Dr. Reeves? And more importantly, where is young Ethan? Sarah's heart raced as she realized Winters' true purpose in coming here, to locate her son and Ranger. They're somewhere you'll never find them, she said with more confidence than she felt. Winters sighed, his patience visibly thinning. This doesn't need to be adversarial. I'm offering collaboration, not coercion. He nodded almost imperceptibly to his men, who began slowly spreading out to flank the group. However, Ranger is legally the property of Northlake Research, and we do have the right to reclaim him. Before anyone could respond, the distinctive wail of police sirens pierced the evening air. Through the trees, they could see patrol car lights flashing in the parking area. Winter's expression flickered with annoyance. Now, who could that be? That would be my insurance policy, Lisa said calmly, holding up her phone. I've been streaming this entire conversation to my boyfriend. He's a detective with Cleveland PD, and he finds corporate espionage and illegal human experimentation fascinating topics. The security men looked uncertainly to Winters, who maintained his composure despite the unexpected development. A minor inconvenience. Nothing we've discussed constitutes illegal activity, and there's no evidence to suggest otherwise. Except the evidence I've been compiling for 6 months, Marjorie countered, producing a small external hard drive from her pocket. Complete documentation of unauthorized human trials, animal cruelty violations, and corporate espionage, including your break-in at the Mitchell residence. I may have left Northlake, but not before securing proof of every ethical breach. For the first time, Winter's confident facade cracked. You're bluffing. Try me, Marjorie challenged. I spent 30 years building my scientific reputation. I won't let you destroy it with your corporate shortcuts. The approaching footsteps of police officers could now be heard on the boardwalk. Winters straightened his jacket, quickly calculating his options. This isn't over. A simple misunderstanding that my legal team will clarify promptly. He turned to leave, his security detail falling in step beside him. Mr. Winters, Sarah called after him. Stay away from my son. He paused, turning back with a thin smile. Your son has remarkable gifts, Ms. Mitchell. Sooner or later, someone will help him develop them. I had hoped it would be in a controlled, beneficial environment, under my company's guidance, but there are others who might not be so benevolent in their approach. With that parting threat hanging in the air, he disappeared down the path toward the approaching officers. The next hours passed in a blur of police statements, explanations, and growing media attention as word leaked about potential corporate espionage involving Westfield Development. Sarah provided a formal statement about the break-in, but omitted details about Ethan's unusual abilities, describing him simply as a concerned child who had heard a dog in distress. By nightfall, the immediate crisis had passed. Bradley Winters had been detained for questioning based on Marjorie's evidence, though Sarah harbored no illusions that a man of his wealth and connections would remain in custody for long. What happens now? She asked Marjorie as they sat in Roy's kitchen, waiting while Michael and Roy checked on Ethan and Ranger in the shelter below. The scientist removed her glasses, suddenly looking every bit her age. Now we protect what matters. Winters was right about one thing. Ethan does have an extraordinary gift, and so does Ranger. Together, she shook her head in wonder. Together, they could change how we understand the connection between humans and animals. But I don't want Ethan to be studied or monitored, Sarah protested. I want him to have a normal childhood. Normal is relative, my dear. Your son will never perceive the world quite the way others do, but with the right guidance, his sensitivity could become his greatest strength. The trapdoor opened, and Michael emerged with Roy following close behind. You need to see this, the veterinarian said softly, gesturing for them to follow. Descending into the shelter, Sarah gasped at the scene before her. Ethan was awake, sitting on the floor beside Ranger. The child's hands rested gently on the dog's face, their foreheads nearly touching, eyes locked in mutual understanding. As they watched, Ethan opened his mouth and formed a single, perfect word: safe. Sarah covered her mouth, tears welling. His first word, she whispered. Michael nodded. He's been repeating it. It's like they're having a conversation, only they can understand. Over the following weeks, Pinewood Springs underwent a transformation born of crisis. The media attention surrounding Bradley Winter's arrest and subsequent legal battles cast an unexpected spotlight on the small suburb. Sarah's neighbors, initially wary of the commotion, rallied around her and Ethan with startling solidarity. Roy organized a community cleanup of the vacant lot where Ranger had been found. What had once been a dumping ground for old appliances and construction debris became a community project. Someone suggested creating a small dog park in the space, and within days, volunteers appeared with tools and materials donated by local businesses. Marjorie Jensen, cleared of any wrongdoing in the Northlake investigation, accepted a position at the local university to continue her research into animal cognition, this time with proper ethical oversight. She became a regular visitor at Sarah's home, observing but never experimenting as Ethan's unique bond with Ranger continued to develop. The German Shepherd recovered fully under Michael's care. With his legal status resolved, Northlake's claim of ownership invalidated by evidence of animal welfare violations, Ranger officially became part of Sarah and Ethan's family. The dog never strayed far from the child, maintaining a watchful presence that seemed to transcend ordinary animal loyalty. As summer faded into autumn, Sarah sat on her back porch, watching Ethan and Ranger play in the yard. Her son's vocabulary had exploded in recent weeks, not unusual for a child his age, but his word choices often carried an awareness beyond his years. He spoke of feelings and sensations as if he could taste colors or hear emotions, describing the world through a perspective uniquely his own. He's like a little poet, Diane remarked, joining Sarah with 2 mugs of coffee. The way he describes things no one else notices. Sarah nodded, accepting the steaming mug. Sometimes I wonder if we all start out with his kind of perception and just lose it as we grow older. Maybe he's not unusual. Maybe the rest of us are just disconnected somehow. The newly installed gate in her fence swung open as Michael entered the yard, carrying a small gift bag. Since the events at Carson Preserve, he had become a close friend, his interest in Ethan and Ranger evolving from professional curiosity to genuine affection. "Special delivery," he announced, handing the bag to Sarah. Inside was a hand-carved wooden sign reading, "Where one heard, another survived." An elegant version of the makeshift marker that had originally been placed at the refrigerator site. For the new park, Michael explained, they're having a dedication ceremony this weekend. Sarah traced the carved letters with her fingertip. "It's perfect." A sudden burst of laughter drew their attention to Ethan, who was now sitting in the grass with his arms wrapped around Ranger's neck. The dog's ears were perked forward, alert to something only he and the child could detect. "There it is again," Michael said quietly. "That connection. I've been working with Marjorie on a paper about interspecies communication, but words don't quite capture what we're seeing here." "It goes beyond communication," Sarah agreed. "It's more like recognition, as if they're the same species somehow, just in different forms. In the center of the yard, Ethan suddenly looked up toward the sky. "Listen," he said clearly, pointing upward where a flock of geese passed overhead, their formation a perfect V against the clouds. Ranger tilted his head skyward, following the child's gesture with remarkable focus. "What do you hear, sweetie?" Sarah called. Ethan's face lit with an expression of wonder that made Sarah's heart ache with its purity. "Everything, Mommy," he replied. "Everything." That evening, as fireflies began to appear in the gathering dusk, neighbors congregated in the transformed, vacant lot. Children ran with dogs through the newly installed play equipment, while adults gathered around picnic tables discussing plans for a community garden to occupy the remaining space. Roy stood beside Sarah, watching. Ethan introduced Ranger to a group of fascinated children. "Your boy's becoming quite the local celebrity," he observed. "He's teaching them," Sarah replied softly, "not just about Ranger, but about listening, really listening to the world around them." From across the park, she caught Michael's eye. He smiled and raised his cup in a small salute that held questions neither of them had answers for yet. What would Ethan's gift mean as he grew older? How would the connection between boy and dog evolve? What other sensitivities might emerge? But those were concerns for another day. Tonight was about community, about the invisible threads that had been woven between neighbors who had once barely acknowledged each other in passing. Threads that had started with a child's ability to hear what others could not, and a dog's instinct to protect what he recognized as kindred. As darkness fell, someone switched on the string lights that had been hung through the trees, transforming the once abandoned space into a glowing haven. Sarah watched as Ethan, now sleepy in her arms, reached out to touch Ranger's muzzle in their familiar ritual of connection. "Safe," the boy murmured, his eyes already closing. The German shepherd settled at Sarah's feet, his vigilant gaze sweeping the gathering before returning to the child. In that moment of perfect trust, Sarah understood what Marjorie had been trying to explain all along. This wasn't just about unusual perceptual abilities or the bond between a child and his dog. It was about a way of experiencing the world that most humans had forgotten, an ancient whisper that still echoed. For those who knew how to listen, and in Pinewood Springs, where an abandoned refrigerator had once stood, people were learning to listen again, one whisper at a time. Dear listeners, we hope the journey of Ethan and Ranger has touched your hearts. Their extraordinary connection reminds us that sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones we must listen for, with more than just our ears. If you've enjoyed this emotional tale, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about the remarkable bonds between humans and animals. Find it by clicking on the link to your left. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up if their story moved you. Every day, we bring you unique narratives that explore life's complexities and hidden connections. Our next story premieres tomorrow at 8 p.m. Will you be listening for the whisper? Join us in the comments and share your own experiences of connections that transcend understanding. Until next time, remember to listen with your heart as well as your ears.